How's it going, guys? It's Illuminostic, and welcome to another Lightstream. I have a message saying that my stream has poor health, and if it gets too laggy, we might have to try again another time. But aside from that, I did stream on this on Christmas Day, which I do every year, and we're definitely going to go over some ideas that I didn't have time to flesh out in the last stream. But I'm also going to repeat a little bit of it because they're all such powerful and such important points. And, one of the things I want to make clear is that I'm not doing this just to, attack people's beliefs or to be a troll. This is more than just an examination of the negative influence of Christianity. It looks like we have a really laggy stream, huh? What's going on, Chris? So it's also an opportunity to look at all of these aberrative psychological mechanisms that are not only encouraged by religions like Christianity, but are actually they sort of set a precedent or a pattern or a condition in our being that allows us to have these sort of perceptions and to maintain cognitive dissonance and selective perception in every single arena of life, from politics to this question from Jacob Hannibal: what would be the fastest way, in your opinion, to bring shamanic consciousness and seeking experience for ourselves to the masses rather than religion and dogma? Psychedelics, under the proper circumstances, combined with all of the other techniques that we have been given from different masters and traditions over time and throughout the world. But I think that at this point, actually, research makes it clear that psychedelics are the most efficacious means that we have of dissolving matrix-bound consciousness and moving on to a place of greater depth and more substantive understanding. Can somebody let me know in the chat if the lag is like really, really bad, because I keep getting this message and I don't want to continue if it's like super choppy. Another thing that I'm going to share with you guys that a lot of people probably have never noticed. In the Bible, they actually tell you what the secret meaning behind it all is over and over and over again. And a lot of people have made the correlation between Jesus and the physical sun. The 3 days in the constellation of the Southern Cross, the death and resurrection, and all of illuminating mankind and all of this stuff. But there's something even more direct and more important that is not even thinly veiled. I mean, it's just right there on the pages, screaming at you, and it's really one of the most fundamental and deep secrets of the mysteries. And so, I'm trying to remember the main bits of information that I missed in the last stream, but I know that I did say that if you add up all of the deaths that have happened in the name of Christianity, it actually totals higher than all of the deaths from all the dictators in human history combined, and all of the natural disasters as well. And one of the things that I find so disturbing about this is that, the KKK has bake sales, right? And they give the money to charity. But that does not, people still will look down on you if you support them, right? The Nazis killed 6 million Jews. The Christians have killed over 1 billion in the total history. Set science back 200 years. The continued suppression of it looks like maybe we've lost everyone due to poor streaming quality. Is that you back there, Enrica? Yeah, I don't know if he did pay to speed this up because it's really, really, really bad tonight. Yeah, that's unfortunate because we had a good number, I think, of people. Oh, Man. Lag is getting better? Okay, well, do me a favor and hit the like button, and I'm going to make a video about all of this that's an actual video. It is distracting me as well, kind of messing with my continuity, like watching the video freeze over and over and over again. But again, to kind of reiterate what we talked about in the last stream, one of the biggest issues with religion in general is that it actually makes people dumber. And it's kind of a chicken or the egg question, like which came first. Were they dumb first, or did the religion make them dumber? But religion is basically a pacifier for fear of the unknown, right? Mankind, from what I can tell, the greatest fear that people have is fear of the unknown. They're terrified that nobody really knows what's going on in the government. That's why you have either, conspiracy theorists that have all these insane ideas, most of which probably aren't true. And then you have the matrix-bound normies that are afraid to think outside of the box. Either way, it's motivated by fear. When someone adopts a prepackaged, prefabbed religion, it's for the same reason. They are afraid of staring too long into the abyss and having the abyss stare back into them. It says no data now. Man, that is rough. We have such a bad connection. Yeah, this is really distracting. I'm about ready to abort. If it keeps doing this, I'm gonna just reschedule this or something and try to see if I can get a new router out here or whatever. But yeah, so what happens if people get a pacifier for that fear? It's like getting opiates prescribed for an injury. The injury doesn't necessarily get healed. The pain is just gone. So when you adopt a religion, you no longer have to seek answers. You no longer have to think about these things. And because that security blanket is such a treasured aspect of your fundamental being, it informs your entire worldview to the degree that, if you have to do psychological gymnastics that are limiting, that are, false, selective perception and denying obvious reality and truth, and, all of the stuff that comes with it that you have to do. Or, I'll give you some great examples. One of them is this idea that the Christian God is all loving and benign, and yet, Satan is walking around minding his own business. Jehovah shows up, and I think if you mix psychedelics and Christianity, usually the Christianity just goes away. People realize it's just a myth. And I will show you what is basically the absolute proof. I mean, this is the thing that is probably the most powerful revelation, but I don't want to go there quite yet. What the hell was I talking about? It was, so Satan is walking to and fro upon the earth, minding his own business. Jehovah shows up and says, Satan, what are you doing? Satan says, I'm walking to and fro upon the earth, my lord. And God is like, what about Job? Why don't you go fucking kill him, or don't kill him, but kill his whole family, give him boils, give him plagues, kill all of his livestock, burn his house down, and see if he's still loyal. And so Satan goes and does it, and he comes back, and he's like, well, he's still loyal. And that Job is like, well, that's not good enough. Go wreak a bunch more havoc on him. Okay, so what is that? First of all, Satan is supposed to be the adversary, or the rebellious, the adversary of God. He's rebelling against God. And yet there are 2 times that Satan appears in the Bible. The first time, Jesus is walking around starving himself and about to die of dehydration out in the desert, and Satan says, you really don't have to do this. You could just go to town and get a drink of water. And of course, Jesus is in some sort of egomaniacal, delusional state where he feels like he has to torture himself half to death to prove some kind of point. And so that's one time that Satan shows up telling Jesus just go get a drink of water and not torture himself. The second time is when he's walking to and fro upon the earth, and Jehovah shows up and tells him to go torture Job. So it's not Satan that has this idea to just go do evil stuff to people for no reason. He's commanded to do it by God. But here's an even better example of the kind of cognitive dissonance that you are required to inculcate in order to maintain a Christian worldview. Nobody said I hated Jesus as an individual, and it's just weird to, like, you're equating, like, Jesus with the golden rule as if morality didn't exist before Jesus. Like, that just makes no sense at all. Everything that Jesus said and did can be found in older writings. Like, he did not invent morality. And, you know, the last stream I started out by saying that the highest possible spiritual teaching is, you know, to love your neighbor as you would love yourself. But there's rarely a single Christian on the entire face of the planet that does it. This is one of the things that makes right-wingers so hypocritical, because so many of them are Christian, but they believe that their stuff is theirs, and they shouldn't pay taxes, and they shouldn't have to share with their neighbor, and you know what I mean? They're like, oh, but praise Jesus. And it's like, well, the main, you know, charge of the Christian, all of you deny it. So, and the thing about this is, you can say, you know, Jesus had good intentions. You can't equate him with Jehovah. Throughout the Bible, he supports Jehovah's decisions. He justifies his murders. He tells you that if a child, Jesus actually said, if a child curses his parents, you should kill that child. Okay, this is the advice of the supposed lamb that's so kind and gentle and loving. You know what I mean? Like, your perception, most Christians' perception of Jesus is not even consistent with the things that he said and did in the Bible. So, you know, he was a hypocrite at the very least. But let's continue on with this cognitive dissonance that's required of you. Because, you know, I saw this video on TikTok a long time ago, and I actually do edit it, I think is what they call it. And so this woman was saying, you know, it's absolutely true that these Satanists make blood sacrifice of children. Except that if you go and you look for actual documented case of child sacrifice in a satanic context, there's hardly any actual proven examples of that. But you can find Christian cults that have murdered children by the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, right? So, you know, there's that fact that, like, if you actually look at the numbers, your children and you and everyone else on this planet are far more at risk at the hands of Christians than anybody else. Now, you might say there's a much larger number, and that's true, but still a little weird. But this woman was saying that, you know, the ultimate evil of Satanists is that they murder innocent children. Apparently, these Christians that say this have never read the New Testament, because the whole thing is predicated on their God murdering an innocent person. That's the whole story. So, you know, and when I point that out and people have never even noticed it, it's like horrifying. You know, it's like, this is your religion. This is the deepest connection that you have with the universe. This is the belief system that informs everything you do, how you conduct yourself, what you believe. And you haven't even thought about it, you know? Look what Satan was ordered to do to Job. I mean, you know, so let me try to catch up with some of these questions here. Yeah, sure, that's another one. I mean, some people that take psychedelics are like, oh, I smoked DMT and I saw Jesus. Well, you know what? I've seen thousands of entities, and that doesn't make them real in the objective sense. That is less than meaningless. That's another thing that, you know, it does. Like, this sort of belief that you can just have faith despite observation, despite reason, for absolutely no reason other than the culture that you were a part of has this book that a lot of people believe is true, even though it's completely ridiculous, insane, violent. There's, like, God in the Old Testament orders, like, two sisters to seduce their father, and, you know, infanticide, and people talk about Jesus being so loving and kind, but he's, like, telling people that they should kill their children if they curse their parents and stuff. It's, you know, so you have to commit to an extraordinary level of denial of obvious reality. You have to accept that intuition, subjective experience, that just feeling something is, proof. And this does not help anyone. This is like extremely damaging. This is not wisdom. This is not intelligence. And the fact that a Christian can't look at a Muslim and say, wait a minute, if that Muslim, let's use the case of an extremist, and I want to be clear, I'm not trying to say that all Muslims are extremists, but a Muslim extremist specifically, they believe in this so wholeheartedly that they're willing to run into a building and blow themselves up. Most Christians would not blow themselves up for their beliefs. So his faith is greater, but you still think you're right. So if metric is your faith for certainty, how can you decide that your beliefs are somehow more solid than someone who's willing to go much further for them? And so in order to do that, you have to have some degree of solipsism, narcissism, some kind of superiority. And so whether a person that is willing to accept this kind of belief system has these sort of issues before they accept the belief system, or whether the belief system itself inculcates people with the seed of this stuff, is really irrelevant, And for all of you guys that have been saying, well, people just are misunderstanding Christianity, they're misapplying it, they're not real Christians, you've had 2,000 years to get your shit together. Give it up. A good system works. A good system gives you the results that are advertised. Christians have been asking the church to show them the securities for 2,000 years and nothing has happened. You literally, in the Catholic Church, you have a guy that literally sits on a golden throne and tells people to pray for starving children. In 2005 or 2003, I think, right after the last pope was inaugurated, or whatever the word is, he actually gave a speech, and this is on the internet, you can see it, it's not a conspiracy theory, it's real, in front of 80,000 Catholics or something. And he actually said that Lucifer, the father of our Lord Jesus, right in front of all these Catholics, and they're so brain dead, brainwashed that none of them even noticed. It looked like no one in the crowd stopped and went, wait, what did he say? It obscures reality to the degree that people can't even see what's happening in front of their face. So how can you possibly defend a system that produces those results? That after 2,000 years, it's still, you're saying, oh, there's almost no good Christians. Well, there's plenty of good all sorts of other things. Why are you still defending it? And I hate to tell you this, you guys, but those of you that are doing that, it's because you're a little bit brainwashed. You might not be totally brainwashed, but everything is on a spectrum. And, I went through this to a degree myself. All of us, this religion, the Judeo-Christian thing, has permeated Western culture to the extent that even if you're not Christian, you are infected with the germ of the Judeo-Christian mentality. You have guilt and shame that does not belong to you. Almost certainly, even if, it doesn't even have to be practiced in your household. But when I was really, I got really deep into my awakening process where I was, chewing through my own subconscious, I started to confront all this weird Christian crap that I wouldn't have thought was even there. Because I'm not, it wasn't even in my house, but it's in the culture to the point where it has managed to permeate us all to some degree or another. Just trying to catch up with the chat a little bit here, bear with me. I do appreciate that a lot of people are hitting the like button, even though it's really laggy and probably oh, we have an excellent condition now. I almost want to start over because we had so many good points earlier in the stream when we had a terrible connection. Yeah, we should completely abandon these religions because in the beginning we had truth. Somebody was asking, like, don't you think they all play? No, they don't. Burn them all beyond, like, so black that it's beyond the power of human memory to recall them. There's absolutely no purpose. You do not need a guru or a teacher or a savior or a book to tell you how to be decent. It's just completely insane. And all the baggage that comes with it, all the terror and horror and torture and suppression. I mean, here in South America, all of these cultures have been just wiped out and replaced by this bland, monotonous, boring nothingness of Catholicism. Like and even when you go into the deep jungle now, the, ayahuasca ceremonies, the Shuar guy might start, praying to Jesus in the middle of the ceremony. And I'm going, okay, I can I have my money back so I can get out of here? This is not, like, we don't even know what any of this stuff was anymore because it has been driven so far underground by, the murder and rape and pillage and all this crap of the Christian church. So no, I don't think we need to preserve any of it. You don't need the Bible to tell you to love your neighbor as you would yourself, and speaking of loving your neighbor as you would yourself, you have to really think about the underlying psychological implications of something like the idea that it makes sense that someone else should suffer for your sins. That's not cool. And to say that that is ordained by God, and, it's definitely a really bad example. Okay? And while we're on that particular angle of this, another thing that happens that when Christians do really, really horrible, violent, terrible things, like I went to prison on a minor drug charge, but I did go to prison, and one of the guys that was in there had beaten this guy almost to death. I think he was like, brain damaged because of it at the very least. And, the guy was always like going to church every Sunday and in the jail, and I was like, how can you be a Christian and you beat someone to death? And he said, that's how I can do it. Jesus will forgive me for anything. And, I'm from the deep South, and I heard some kind of variation of that over and over and over again from all sorts of horrible, evil people. And, I think people really, really underestimate how many people there are out there that feel that way. And so, no, the fact that there are a few little nuggets of good advice in the Bible does not justify retaining it all. There's no reason for that. There's absolutely no reason for that. And, one of the big warnings that I think people need to understand, because so many people read it and they're like responding to something in it just so powerfully. And I can tell you what that is. The mystery schools, way back in ancient Greece and back in Egypt, Syria, Babylonia, they knew basically what is the truth. And the reason that we know it's the truth is that science has come to the exact same conclusion. So, for me, when you have two totally disparate systems separated by 3, 4, 5,000 years, and they come to the same ultimate conclusion, there's probably something to that. I mean, it's pretty compelling. And so way back in history, before the Bible, before any of this crap, people knew that consciousness somehow came to us from the light. And there was also this knowledge that the stars were like super conscious, because light is basically born of the electromagnetic wave. And in the center of a star, that's like the greatest density of electromagnetic energy that you could possibly imagine. And stars are just cranking out consciousness. And so, if you look at the poimanders of Hermes, this dragon comes to him and tells him, the light basically is the consciousness, and it crystallized and became matter, which is what science now says, that matter is all light in a standing wave. And, it explains basically reincarnation, that like once you wake up enough, you can remain conscious throughout all of these cycles. And then at the end, the matter dissolves and collapses and returns back to the light. Now that's called quantum loop theory. And it's gaining ground in physics. It's something that came to me as the Phoenix process like 20 years ago, that whole thing. And then when I read that Hermes interaction with that dragon, I was like, oh my God, That is identical to, this realization that I had. And this is why Terence McKenna said if the truth can be told so as to be understood, it will be believed, is that on some level, somewhere deep in ourselves, we all know this stuff. We all know it, including the people that wrote the Bible. And that's the big trick, right? It's almost as if they were taunting people like, we will tell you the real truth, put it right in front of your face, and they're all so dumb that they're not even going to notice it. What was that Winston Churchill said? Sometimes people will stumble across the truth, but they usually just pick themselves up and keep going. And this is a great case of that. And so there are two things that Jesus either said or did that reveal the great secret of the mystery traditions of Christianity, of the occult, and the greatest actual true secret of the universe, which is that consciousness and light are more or less the same thing. And so the first indication is that when Jesus said, "I am the light," the author knew that all of our consciousness is basically just light having a conversation with itself. And there's no way to dispute this. There are only fundamentally two things in the universe: void and light. Matter is light in a standing wave. So you have light and nothing. That's it. So there's no way around it. Consciousness, God, whatever, it's light having a conversation with itself. That's all it can be, because that's all there is, right? And whoever wrote the Bible knew it. So people read that and they say, wow, Jesus knew things that people didn't discover for 2,000 years. Well, except that plenty of people knew that 2,000 years before the Bible was written. You know what I mean? And then so the other thing that happens is that Jesus walks on water. You ever seen the sun reflecting on the ocean? That's all that is a reference to. And then, of course, the other clue is that he is sort of an allegory, not sort of, but directly an allegory of the sun. And I almost don't want to talk about it because everybody knows this at this point, I would think. But 3 days on the Southern Cross, the death and resurrection, there's other stuff. And then aligning all of his holidays with solstices and stuff. I mean, it's just so absurdly, right there on the table. And while we're on the subject of how to reveal the falsehood of it all, Jesus is a composite myth based on older figures. Everybody's heard that, but really what's even more damning than that is that the Roman consulate actually, someone turned up papers, minutes from the meetings, where they said, okay, we have a problem with these rogue tribes that expect this warrior messiah. We need to find a way to make them pacifist and easier to control. And they said, okay, well, let's take all their pagan holidays and put new holidays over them, and let's create this peaceful savior guy and get some of the initiates of the mysteries to write this stuff so it has some real mystical, secrets that people will resonate with because they know it's the truth. We have the documents. There's no question about this anymore, and people seem to not be aware of the fact that people kept diaries and they wrote stuff down. The Romans were pretty educated, and people in other places in the world, there is not one single eyewitness to anything Jesus did. We're talking about big giant crowds gathering and all this stuff. And you know what most people say, most Christians? Well, the disciples wrote their stories. That's what the New Testament is. No, it's not. No, it's not. Those books were written between 70 and 250 years after his death. None of those people were there. And even if they were, why is it that all 7 accounts of Jesus' last words are all different? What is that? What is that? They were all there, right? They all witnessed it. Why are they all saying he said different stuff last? It's just, yeah, they do. They mix truth and falsehood, and that's what really gets people because they know there's something in there. There's a whole lot of other jokes that, when Jesus said, they will not understand the parables. And then it's funny because all the Christians think they understand the parables. It's well, he said himself that you wouldn't understand the parables. Why do you think you understand? He told you wouldn't understand. If you believe he knows everything, then you don't understand. Why? Yeah. But there's other stuff, one of the best ones is that you cannot believe that Jesus is God without breaking the first commandment. So, I've always felt that the actual story that's told in the New Testament is the story of a false prophet coming and tricking everyone and deceiving everyone into believing that like the devil couldn't perform, let's assume it's all true, couldn't perform miracles and convince a bunch of uneducated, like tribal people that he was, you know, God incarnate. I mean, what? And this God that he called his father was doing all kinds of evil shit all the time and condoning evil and violence. And I mean, come on. To me, if you read the Bible as if you have no preconceptions of what it's supposed to be, the serpent told the truth in the Garden of Eden. That's the first one. Like, you can't even get through the first chapter without realizing the official narrative versus what happens in the book are not the same, right? Not to mention the fact that Jehovah isn't even male in the Hebrew. It's Elohim, which is masculine and feminine and plural, and it's female Shekinah. Yod-He Vav-He is just the elements. You can't even get through the first book without a huge discrepancy, because the serpent told the truth. It was Jehovah that lied, right? That's what the Gnostics realized. The early Gnostics realized that got them all burned alive. And by the way, if you are actually peddling the truth, you don't have to threaten and murder and torture and rape people in order to get them to accept your beliefs. I wanted to mention too, this DMT Turner guy. Apparently he was complaining about my opinions about all this on his live the other day, and one of the things that he said in the comments was, well, what about the fact that all these South American shamans believe in it? Their ancestors were tortured and beaten, the women raped, they were forced to, and it's become a cultural, just like in the, what are you even talking about? Like, how could you even say that? Who doesn't know that at this point? Yeah, so okay, so we were going through the other stuff that the mystery school initiates that composed the Bible knew, and they made it all pretty obvious. There's really glaring stuff that I don't know how people miss this, but the first commandment, thou shalt have no other gods. There's no caveat that says until my son comes, right? And it doesn't say you can believe this other guy just because he says this and can do miracles and stuff, right? Crosses, pictures of Jesus, all blasphemy, because the second commandment, thou shalt have no graven images. So that's all, not good according to the Ten Commandments. And then, this is one of my favorites, John warns right before Jesus comes and says, I am the light and God has sent me, which basically more or less makes him an angel, right? Beware, Satan may come as an angel of light. Almost immediately, Jesus is like, hello, I am the light and I've come from God. And it's like everyone reading that book should stop and go, wait a minute. Weren't we just warned about exactly this like 25 pages ago? There's not even that much space between the two instances or the two occurrences in the book. We're told to beware wolf in sheep's clothing. Jesus is often called the lamb. That wolf. Lucifer, the name Lucifer only occurs twice in the Bible, once in Ezekiel and once when Jesus uses it to refer to himself in Revelation. Let's see, there's more direct, and then you can look at Elohim does mean the powerful ones plural, but it is also both masculine and feminine. So it implies a group of women more than it does a man walking around. Okay, so I want to make sure that we got through all the most important stuff. Defining evil as someone who murders innocent children. Jehovah kills his own innocent son. Are you guys sure you're not the devil worshippers out there, Jeebus fans? That's a huge one, man, that people don't notice that. That's really scary. By the way, you guys, do me a favor, hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon, or there are options in the description that you can send money on Zelle or PayPal. I'm going to copy it right now and put it in the chat. I've actually lost a bunch of subscribers for making the last part of this, and I'm sure this one will cost me a few as well. So if you haven't subscribed and you appreciate this content, please do, because I'm losing some traction for saying this stuff, and I feel like it's really important. it's still being used to this day to divide people. Right now, there's a huge um, amount of leverage being put on people to bring them back into the church. You know, I'm always saying that people have become suspicious of the mainstream narrative for good reasons. They know they're being lied to. They know it's all a big dupe, but you should be way more suspicious of the alternative narratives because the people on the fringes are the ones that you need to control. Here's another little interesting tidbit that people seem to be missing. If there's really truly something dangerous in the the thing that everybody's being told they have to have, um, why are they targeting the people that are cooperating? The number of people that haven't thought about that when I mention it is a bit alarming. Um, just wanted to throw that out there while we're on the subject. Okay, so I'm trying to go back through our main bulletin points here, make sure I got them all. The cognitive dissonance. And then the fact that it's still being used to this day to divide people. So, people are sheep, and the reality is that people that even have escaped the Matrix narratives tend to just crawl into another box. So you get out of one box, and people just look around and find a different box and jump in it. And then they believe everything they think that demographic is supposed to believe. So, for example, people become spiritual in the New Age sense, and they're like, okay, I need to, cram a bunch of amethyst crystals up my butt, buy a bunch of Nag Champa that's made with like petrol chemicals and recycled cardboard and burn that all the time. And you know what I mean? And believe in chakras and all this stuff. Like they just adopt it all and just believe it because that's what you're supposed to do if you're spiritual, apparently. People become woke and suddenly they think that it's, really important to give, 5-year-old sex changes. And you know what I mean? Like it's just, people just adopt the entire belief system of the. So now that the left has been seriously, seriously demonized, and this is something that's been going on ever since there's been a left, right? But it's all a dupe. It's all a dupe. But at any rate, they're demonizing the left so that they can push people back into the church. That's part of the agenda there. I think a lot of the really extreme stuff that's happening on the left that's just so over the top it's unbelievable, that's social engineering. Those people are operatives, like the guy at the White House that is like in charge of like nukes or something, and it's not just that he's like transgender, he's so over the top ridiculous insane. They're doing it deliberately. I really think they are doing it deliberately. Actually, Paul Ross, it's true. Lucifer wasn't even a god of light in Rome. That was Phosphorus or Phosphor or something. I can't remember which it was, but it is true that in the book of Ezekiel, when Lucifer is written in the English version, I can't remember the entire line, but Ben Hillel means howl, son of morning, and that is what is actually in the Hebrew Bible there. There's no Lucifer. It doesn't even exist in the Old Testament, not one mention. And then if you read it in Greek, it's going to say Hesperus, which translates to morning star. But you're absolutely right, and they think that what actually happened is the guy that wrote Ezekiel, he had a political opponent at the time that was named Saint Lucifer. And so what's going on, T? So he was trying to take a swipe at his political opponent by making him the enemy in the Bible. So there's no such thing as Lucifer in reality, and there never was a Lucifer in the Old Testament. But yeah, so because people are such sheep, they're trying to drive people into the right and then drive them into the church, because that's how that works, And the more people are convinced that an actual satanic conspiracy is going on amongst the elite, they're all drinking blood, taking adrenochrome and whatever, the more people are going to flock back into the church. So, people think they're uncovering the elites, but what they really do is just they're playing along. They think that they're, taking out these people, but really they're doing exactly what they want you to by believing all of this stuff. The adrenochrome conspiracy is one of the dumbest, and it's one of the most widely believed. And the reason that I know that it's so dumb is because I know the adrenal glands contain a few hundred micrograms per person of adrenochrome, maybe only if certain conditions, like if they died afraid, and there was a bunch of adrenaline, because it like basically breaks down into adrenochrome. Um, Adrenochrome is more of a stress hormone than a psychoactive drug, so taking it would be horrible. You would just have a panic attack, your heart would beat real fast, you would sweat bullets, you would age much more rapidly, right? And that's supposed to be the thing, they're doing it to remain young. Also, if you're actually getting your adrenal glands from babies, you would need like a dump truck full for like one dose. It's just so dumb, it's unbelievable. And it's also extremely cheap to synthesize. So, and you can order it from China. If any of you guys don't believe me, order some. I would not recommend it, but you can do it. And you'll see, like, this, it's totally stupid. There's no possibility that it's real. Um, so, yeah, I mean, the main bullet point of that presentation is that people have to be, what do we do to become fully enlightened? I don't think there's any such thing as fully enlightened. Man, there have been a lot of new people in here and no new likes, man. I really need you guys to hit the like button, because I'm demonetized, shadow banned, the algorithm ignores me. So if you think this content is important, it's not that much trouble to click the like button and do me a little bit of a favor. I don't think there is a totally enlightened. It's a spectrum. It's a very, very, very broad spectrum, and so there's going to be a journey, but the journey is the destination. And I know that's a cliche, but I think that it's true cliche, as they often are. But basically, what I think these practices and psychedelics taken in the right context, and also you have to have your critical thinking and skepticism and your real thinking caps on. This isn't the spiritual development is not just a process of emotion and intuition. Absolutely should not be. But once you realize that you are just basically an avatar for light, that's all there is in the universe, that you are experiencing just to experience, that everything is your reflection. So that Tool song, he says, "What are you but my reflection? Who am I to judge or strike you down?" Once you have had a certain level of exposure to what I call the universal mind, it's a process of organic change occurs that happens in a real way. It's a real process. Like, I say this a lot, but it is worth saying again. One of the reasons religion doesn't work is that if you try to just conform to a bunch of rules and just force yourself to do it because you think you have to, it's not really going to work. The only kind of real spiritual transformation, the only kind of real alchemical process is, it happens the same way that anything else in the universe does. If you want to extract gold from quartz, you have to take certain quantity of a certain type of acid and mix it with, what I mean? And then you go through a process and you get a thing, right? You get the gold. And it's the same thing with the alchemical gold of higher consciousness. It has to happen through a genuine, organic, internal process, or else it's not going to be meaningful. They don't need baby's blood. That's what I'm telling you. All this stuff is just bunk. It's all bullshit. Look, Hillary Clinton is not a Satanist. No self-respecting Satanist would dress that frumpy, right? Like, these people are not, like, interesting enough to be Satanists. They're just totally boring. And look how fast they're aging. You know what I mean? That's another thing about this. Like, if the elite are all bathing themselves in blood, why are they all getting old if it works, Again, you guys, I think all that type of propaganda, the Satanists are controlling the world and all this stuff, is driven by the church itself in order to bring people back into the fold, trying to scare people back into, the religion, because they can't use the kind of techniques that they used to use in the past. They can't go out and force everyone at the end of a sword to get down on their knees and pray to Jesus. So they're using scare tactics. They're filling the media full of all of these stories that have no substantive, like, one of the things that, I'm always saying about the Illuminati is that people say, Illuminati symbols are everywhere and blah, blah, blah. These are just things that people have called Illuminati symbols. If you look at Adam Weishaupt's writings, there are only two symbols. And none of them are any of this crap that you're seeing everywhere. It's just, people are just making stuff up, and then once it gains traction, everyone just believes it. And the reason is the same reason that so many people adopt religions. They're scared of the unknown, so they're willing to believe anything if it means that the ultimate devil, the devil of the absolute darkness of the unknown, of the unrelenting mystery, is going to be kept at bay, whether it's a delusion or not. Right? That's what motivates all of this stuff. That's what drives false beliefs. It's such a deeply layered situation because, you have the basically emotional and psychological aberrations that create the circumstances where religion is needed in the first place. And then once the religion is absorbed and integrated into the being of a person, you have a whole nother host of toxic traits that are necessary in order to retain your belief in this obviously foolish fairy tale. Yeah, of course, no one person has the answers to absolutely everything. I mean, that's the point. The way that I understand the universe is that nothingness became conscious by realize it's like once it became conscious, it was no longer nothing. So there was just energy and space. There was a wave, and that's it. And through a process of replication by means of reflection, the pattern expanded and complexified until it became matter and creation. And so that whole process has been repeating and repeating and repeating and expanding. Yeah, 42 is the answer. Do you know why it's 42? 42 is in computer programming at that time. It could be anything you wanted. So the answer of the 42 as the great meaning of life was that it is whatever you make it. That's what was that called? The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But that's where that originates, or where he got the idea. So this process repeated, and it grew and expanded, and then at the end, when it runs out, when it's fulfilled every possibility that it can without violating any of its laws, because it can't, the light is always consuming itself. This is what the Ouroboros symbol is actually symbolizing. It's the dragon of light that Hermes encountered that told him how the universe worked. And so once it's expanded and it's run out of all the potential and possibilities that it possibly can with the strictures of natural law that have been imposed upon it, it collapses back into the singularity, but the energy can't go anywhere because the energy cannot be destroyed. It can only transform. So, it's no longer substantive, so it collapses back. The vacuum can no longer be supported. It collapses, and eventually it collapses into such a tiny space with so much energy that the whole thing, another big bang, and it starts all over again. I realized this in a vision. I called it the Phoenix process, and now there is a school of physics calling it quantum loop theory. This is what the Poemanders, the dragon, told Hermes. And that's, it just makes sense.